Welcome back, recroom creators. This is Marisa. If you're looking to learn more about how hierarchy works in rooms too, this tutorial is for you. In the last tutorial, we learned how to create this door and how to use all the tools. Now let's break this door apart into containers in the hierarchy. Why do we want to separate objects in the hierarchy? Well, it helps us organize content we create, making it easier to work with when we have a lot of moving parts. This means we can easily move and rotate an entire container with many moving parts without it falling apart. Hierarchy building also works well with Rec Room Studio, especially when we're creating complex animations and recoloring different parts. So let's get started. I added some decorations to my sandcastle door to give it more character. Right now, all these shapes are in the same container, making it harder to recolor and texture them later. So let's separate the different parts into their own containers. Containers are like folders that contain multiple folders and files. In this case, a container can hold shapes, props, and even circuits. You can view all of your containers in your hierarchy menu by opening up your Maker Pen menu and going to your hierarchy menu here. Let's first rename this container. Open up your Maker Pen menu, select the Configure tool in your Tools menu, close your menu, and select the sand door. And we can rename the container here. Going to name this to Sand Door. Close your menu, tap off the door, like so. And as you can see, our door is now called Sand Door. We can now find our Sand Door container in our hierarchy menu. Here. When we select the drop-down arrow, we can view all the objects in that container. The box icon represents containers, the triangle icon means shape. If you ever find this icon, this stands for circuits. If we select one of these shapes in the hierarchy, it will automatically edit to that shape, like so. And you can adjust that shape right away. Let's create several different containers within the sand door container to help organize everything. Let's put the outer trim of this door into its own container. Let's open up our Maker Pen menu, go to our Tools menu, select Select Tool. I'm going to select the outer trim of this door here. When selecting multiple objects, you're going to get this Options menu that pops up. Let's quickly go over those. Make Inventions saves your selected objects and stores them in your palette. Edit Out and Move Selected. This will move the current selection up one level, in this case, out of the container to the room level. Adding a selection to a new container places the selected items into a container within the current one, called Sand Door in this case, because we're currently editing the Sand Door container. The new created container would become a sub-container of Sand Door, which we call this a child. So Sand Door is the parent container, and the new container is its child. To simplify this, consider it like working with folders. Sand Door is the main folder, we call this the parent. And the new container is a folder inside it, so subcontainers are called children of the container it is under, parent. So this would be a child container of Sand Door, so subcontainers are called children of the container it is under. Create basic container. This creates an empty container that you can edit into and add shapes, props, or circuits. For example, this container would be a child container of the parent container, Sand Door in this case. Disable Pivot Select. When you select multiple objects but do not want to select the pivot point, you can disable this selection using this option. Center Pivot recenters your pivot to the middle of the selection. You can also change the position of your pivot by moving it or rotating it. Align. This provides you with more options to align your shapes. Copy. You can copy your selection and paste it elsewhere, even in a different container. This works great for circuits. You can find your copied selection in your palette under Clipboard, and you can easily access it while the Select tool is selected in your Tools under Contextual Settings, right here. Now that is what all the options mean. Our goal is to move the selection to a new container, making it a child of the Sand Door container. Let's select Add Selection to New Container. We've placed all the selection in its own container. Let's check out our hierarchy menu. Here. There it is, the container is now a child of the Sand Door. Let's rename this container to trim, but before we do, let's go over some of the new options that appeared in the options menu after we moved all those shapes to their own container. We have additional options. Edit in, edit the container to adjust objects within it. Edit out and move to the room. This removes it from the sandboard container and moves it to the room level. Separate objects. This is removing these shapes from the current container. Let's change the name of this child container to trim by opening up our Maker Pen menu and selecting Configure, and then select the child container, like so. Let's call this child container Trim. Great! Now let's place all the bricks on the door trim and put them in their own container. Then we can select Add Selection to New Container from the Options menu here. You can see that this is now a different container. Let's name that container to Bricks. Select your Configure tool, and let's call this Bricks. Great! Now let's select the trim and the bricks by using our Select tool, and go to the Options menu and Add Selection to New Container. Bam! Let's open up our Maker Pen menu and go to our hierarchy. Let's go to Sand Door. And then we have a new container with trim and bricks. Let's name this container Trim. Let's go to our Tools menu. Let's select the Configure tool, then select our trim, and we're going to call this Trim. Boom. Great. So now we have one container called Trim, and then there's two child containers called Bricks and Trim. We can view that in our hierarchy menu under Trim, Trim, Bricks. So Trim container and Bricks container are child containers of Trim. Now let's continue breaking up our door. I'm going to quickly select the rivets and the door handle before moving forward with renaming these containers using the Configure tool. First, to get started, open up your Maker Pen menu, go to Select tool, and let's just go ahead and select the panels on the door, like so. I'm going to separate that into its own container. Great. And then let's go ahead and select the inner part of the trim. And let's put this in its own container. Let's make sure we don't have that one selected. And selection to new container, great. Now let's put the back of the door into its own container. Select the door's back, and you will see some different options in the options menu here. We have two new options. Put in a container. This is very similar to add selection to new container. It places the selected shape into its own container. Another new option here is make child of target parent. This means when you select an object or a container, you can then select another container to make it a child of that container. Let's select Put in Container. Now the back of the door is in its own container. Now let's continue breaking up our door. I am going to quickly separate the rivets and the door handle before moving forward and renaming these containers using the Configure tool. Great! All the door parts are separated into different containers and renamed. Now that we have separated them all into different containers, let's go ahead and combine them into one container. I'm going to go ahead and select the panel, the trim panel, and the back of the door, the rivets, and the handle. And I'm going to move all of that, add to selection to new container. Bam. All right, so now that we did that, let's go ahead and name that container Inner Door. We can actually do a lot in the hierarchy menu. We can actually move these containers in the hierarchy menu. Go ahead and open up your Maker Pen menu, go to Hierarchy. In the hierarchy, we have the containers Sand Door, Trim, Inner Door. Then if we expand the Inner Door container, these are the children containers of Inner Door, and the Sand Door is the parent of all of these children containers. When you have children containers, these are called compound objects. Let's place the panel trim container into the panel container by selecting and dragging it into this container. And now we have the panel trim in panel container. Let's go ahead, go back to our tools menu, and then let's back out of all the containers there. And this is our sand door. It's all set up, but let's go ahead and make the back of the door. And we can easily do that by cloning and flipping it. So let's go ahead and open up our Maker Pen menu, selecting clone, and select on this container. And we're just gonna go ahead and flip that. Great, that looks pretty good. That looks like a really nice heavy sand door. Now, these are two different containers now. We can actually combine these containers by going to our selection menu and selecting them and add selection to new container, or we can go ahead and connect the containers with the connect tool. So I'm gonna go ahead and drag this one over that one, and now they are in the same container. We can go ahead and edit that by selecting edit in our Maker Pen menu and editing into the container. Let's go ahead and deselect, edit. There we go. Pretty cool, very neat. Let's go ahead and back out. And that is how you work with the hierarchy in recroom. I hope this video was helpful. Next, we'll create a way to open and close doors using circuits in the hierarchy. Can't wait to see all of your creative designs. Be creative and give your rec room best.